The drill bit screamed through the last meter of compressed silicate, and then hit nothing. Lena Voss felt the vibration change before the control panel registered it, a deep, hollow thump that traveled up the drilling column like a bass note through bone. She was already moving, safety harness snapping free, boots clanging on the gantry. Around her, the mining team exchanged uneasy glances. 6 weeks of tunneling on Kalpos 9, a dead world with no atmosphere and no tectonic activity, and they had never encountered a void. The seismic scans had shown solid strata all the way down to the mantle. "Cut the rotation," she ordered. "Deploy the mapping drone." The drone descended through the fresh borehole on a carbon fiber tether, its floodlights cutting through swirling dust. The feed flickered onto Lena's helmet display. For a long moment, her brain refused to assemble what she saw. The hole opened into a cavern so vast that the drone's lights faded into blackness without touching a far wall. But below, just meters from the drill tip, stretched a surface. Not rock, not mineral. It was a curved expanse of dark metal that swallowed the drone's spotlight and gave back only a faint, deep amber pulse, like a heartbeat made visible. The surface had no seams, no welds, no plating lines. It was perfectly smooth, impossibly so, and when the drone's laser rangefinder bounced off it, the return signal carried a modulation that the computer could not parse. "Readings?" Lena asked, her voice quieter than she intended. Senior geologist Dara Okonkwo shook her head, her dark eyes fixed on her own data stream. "Composition unknown. No match in the spectral library. The material is reflecting only a fraction of the energy we're putting into it. And the void, Lena, the void extends beyond the drone's maximum mapping range. We're talking hundreds of kilometers in every direction." Lena stared at the pulsing light beneath her feet. The cavern they had breached was not a cavern at all. It was a chamber inside something. Something buried under 3 kilometers of planetary crust, sleeping. "Pull up the regional survey," she said. "Overlay it with the deep penetration scans from last month." The image assembled on the main screen, and the entire operations deck fell silent. The object was a sphere, or close to it, measuring just over 11,000 kilometers in diameter. It occupied the bulk of the planet's interior, surrounded by a thin shell of natural rock that had accreted around it over millions of years. Kalpos 9 was not a terrestrial world. It was a ship with a planetary camouflage. Someone let out a breath laced with profanity. Lena knelt, her gloved hand pressed against the cold metal floor of the borehole terminus, and she felt the pulse through her palm, a rhythmic throb, slow and patient, like a creature waiting. An interface node rose from the surface without sound, a column of shifting geometry that reshaped itself to match the shape of human fingers. She touched it. The ship woke up. A shockwave of energy burst outward from Kalpos 9, racing through subspace at velocities that violated every known law of physics. On monitoring stations 70 light-years away, alarms erupted. Deep space telescopes recorded the planet's surface cracking open along precise geometric lines, revealing the dark hull beneath. The pulse screamed across the galactic network, triggering dormant sensors that had been silent since before Earth-Sun had formed. Lena's helmet display lit up with a single line of text, translated by a system she did not know existed. "Inheritors detected. Commencing awakening sequence 7 of 7. The interface node warmed under her touch, and somewhere in the infinite dark of the buried ship, lights began to turn on. The Council Hall of Unified Species orbited a white dwarf in the Attican expanse, a structure of interlocking rings that rotated in perpetual, silent motion. Ambassador Adrian Kovac had walked its polished corridors for 11 standard years, long enough to know that when the speaker summoned you without agenda, something catastrophic had occurred. He entered the main chamber to find every delegation already seated. 12 species, from the silicon-based ore to the fluid forms of Vol, all turned their sensory apparatus toward him. The air shimmered with translation fields and barely contained hostility. "Speaker Olm, A towering Chthorian whose carapace shifted color with emotional state struck the resonance plate 3 times, demanding silence. Ambassador Kovac. Ohm's voice carried the distinctive harmonic of controlled fury. Humanity has violated the Treaty of Stillness. 16 hours ago, an energy signature consistent with progenitor technology erupted from the Kalpos system. Our long-range sensors confirm that a world ship has been disturbed. Explain. Adrian did not flinch. He had received the burst transmission from Earth Command 4 hours earlier, and he had spent every minute since preparing for this confrontation. He adjusted the cuff of his formal jacket and met Ohm's gaze directly. The Treaty of Stillness, he said, was signed by 37 species in the aftermath of the scouring. It prohibits the active investigation of progenitor sites, citing the catastrophic dangers of waking what should remain asleep. Humanity did not sign that treaty. We were not yet a spacefaring civilization when it was drafted, and we were never offered the opportunity to accede. A ripple of agitation ran through the delegations. The OR representative emitted a burst of microwave static, their species' equivalent of outrage. You intentionally excavated a burial world. Our ancestors buried those ships for a reason. Our mining team, Adrian continued, had no knowledge of the site's nature. Kalpos 9 was catalogued as a dead planet with heavy metal deposits. We have shared our complete survey logs, including the moment of discovery. There was no intent. He let the pause hang. However, I will not apologize for what the discovery revealed. Humanity has now located 7 such ships. All 7 are powering up. The silence that followed was absolute. Speaker Ohm's carapace drained to a pale, bloodless white, the Chthorian color of existential dread. 7, he repeated. The progenitors only built 7 world ships, the pillars of last light. You have found all of them. They are scattered across the Orion Spur, Adrian said, his voice steady. Buried under worlds much like Kalpos 9. Our scientists believe they were deliberately hidden after the war against whatever the progenitors were fighting. And we believe the ships are now responding to human contact because they were designed to. The fluid form representative extruded a tendril of iridescent liquid. You cannot possibly imply that your species, barely 400 years off its homeworld, is somehow connected to the progenitors. They vanished 300 millennia ago. I imply nothing. Adrian activated his personal holoplate, projecting an image of the Kalpos 9 ship's interface node, captured from a miner's helmet camera. The node had shaped itself to fit a human handprint. The ship recognized our genetic markers. The interface opened for us. It called us inheritors. High Scion Thrave of the Chthorian Armada rose from his seat, his massive form casting a shadow across the chamber floor. Then you will abandon these vessels immediately. The Armada will establish an exclusion zone around each site. Any attempt to re-enter will be met with force. His compound eyes gleamed. The galaxy has seen what happens when a world ship awakens without control. We will not permit it again. Adrian looked at the projected image of the ship, a sphere large enough to swallow Earth's moon, wrapped in shadow and amber light. He thought of Lena Voss, still down there, still linked to something beyond human comprehension. He thought of the other 6 sites, where other teams were already descending. High Scion, he said quietly, with respect, we do not believe the ships will respond to you, and we do not believe they will let us leave. The chamber lights flickered. The station's external sensors detected a secondary pulse, stronger this time, originating simultaneously from 7 different star systems. The world ships were no longer simply awake. They were calling something home. The ship did not speak in words. Lena felt it first as a pressure behind her eyes, a sense of vast, slow thoughts brushing against her consciousness. The interface node had retracted after the pulse, but something had already changed inside her skull. She could hear the ship breathing, a deep, tectonic rhythm that resonated through the metal and into her marrow. Her team had sealed the borehole and retreated to the operations camp on the surface, but Lena had refused to leave. She sat alone in the drill chamber, her helmet off, the air cold and thin but breathable. The amber light from below pulsed steadily, and she realized she was matching her breathing to its rhythm without intending to. "You are the inheritor," the ship said, not in sound but in a cascade of images and emotions that flooded her mind. She saw a galaxy not dark and silent but filled with light, thousands of civilizations, a network of trade and knowledge that spanned the spiral arms. She saw the progenitors, tall and luminous, their bodies half-energy, their minds linked across light years. They were artists and engineers, dreamers and warriors, and they had built the world ships not as weapons but as arcs, meant to carry life across the void to new universes. Then the shroud came. The memory was a shriek of agony. Lena doubled over, clutching her head as the ship showed her the enemy. A dark consciousness not born of matter but of the spaces between stars, a hunger that consumed light, thought, and time itself. The progenitors fought back with everything they had. They lost. One by one their worlds went dark, their minds winked out, and the galaxy fell silent. The last 7 world ships fled to the Orion Spur and buried themselves, rigging their systems to deactivate and wait. "Wait for what?" Lena gasped. The answer came as a single image, a double helix, human DNA, not similar to progenitor genetics, identical. The progenitors had not gone extinct. They had seeded worlds with their own genetic code, stripping away their advanced traits to create a species that could survive in the dark age that followed the Shroud's victory. Humanity was the progenitors' final, desperate gambit. A second chance, grown in obscurity, kept ignorant until the ships could be found and awakened. "The Shroud is returning," the ship showed her. "The pulse we sent was detected. It knows. It is coming back to finish what it started." Lena's communicator crackled. Dara's voice, sharp with fear. "Lena, we have multiple jump signatures in orbit, Cathorian warships. They're targeting our position and issuing an ultimatum." Before Lena could respond, the ship's awareness shifted. She felt it scanning the orbital threat, assessing weapons yields, shield frequencies, intent. The patient, sleeping mind that had waited 300,000 years for its inheritor to arrive suddenly sharpened into something terrifyingly alert. It was a warship. It had always been a warship, and someone was threatening its chosen crew. "Tell them to stand down," Lena said, her voice tight. "Tell them if they fire, they won't survive the response." The ship's hull trembled. Deep within the buried sphere, systems that had slept through ice ages and continental drift began to hum with power. Lena felt it all: the gravitic cannons, the reality stabilization fields, the weapons that could fold space itself into a blade. The ship was not just alive, it was angry. And somewhere in the intergalactic dark, the Shroud heard the call and began its long journey home. High Scion Thrave had commanded the Cathorian Armada's 3rd Fleet for 40 cycles. He had crushed pirate kingdoms, negotiated the surrender of rogue colony clusters, and once stared down a singularity weapon without blinking. He believed, with the certainty of his species, warrior tradition, that overwhelming force solved every tactical equation. Standing on the bridge of the Sovereign Wrath, he studied the tactical hologram of Kalpos 9 and saw only a crippled, half-buried relic that had no business challenging his authority. "Power readings from the buried structure are increasing," his sensor officer reported. "The human team has not evacuated. We are detecting a single life sign remaining near the interface zone," the team leader Voss. "Unfortunate," Thrave said without a trace of regret. "Target the excavation site. Firing a warning shot will demonstrate our commitment. A kinetic slug, low yield, enough to collapse the dig but spare the ship." The Sovereign Wrath rotated its forward cannon and fired. A 10-kilogram tungsten rod accelerated to relativistic speed, aimed precisely at the human drilling platform on Kalpos 9's surface. The shot never landed. The ship beneath the planet intercepted it with a gravitic shear. A sudden, localized distortion of spacetime that folded the incoming projectile's trajectory back upon itself. The tungsten rod reappeared 300 meters from the Cathorian flagship, moving at the same velocity, and struck the Sovereign Wrath amidships. The cruiser's shields flared white, buckled, and collapsed. The hull split open from bow to stern, venting atmosphere and crew into the vacuum. Secondary explosions rippled through the dying vessel, and within 15 seconds, the pride of the Third Fleet was a debris cloud. The remaining Cathorian ships, 4 heavy cruisers, 8 destroyers, scrambled to raise shields and arm weapons. But a second pulse erupted from Calpo's 9, this one targeted at subspace frequencies. It washed over the fleet and kept going, spreading across the galaxy at speeds that made lightspeed look like a crawl. In the council hall, Adrian Kovac watched the tactical feed with a face like stone. Speaker Ulm's carapace had gone completely gray, the Cathorian equivalent of a death pallor. The other delegations were shouting, transmitting, demanding action. "Your ship just destroyed a Cathorian flagship," the OR representative shrieked. "This is an act of war." "Your flagship fired on our personnel without provocation," Adrian replied. He did not raise his voice. "The ship responded to a direct attack. I warned High Scion Thrave that the world ships would not tolerate aggression. He chose not to listen." "You are defending a machine that killed 4,000 beings." Adrian turned to face the OR. "I am explaining that you cannot point a weapon at something that has slept since before your species evolved and expect it to file a diplomatic protest. The world ships were built to fight the Shroud. They interpret threats and eliminate them. This was self-defense, and every sensor log in this chamber will confirm it." A new signal overrode the tactical displays. The 6 other world ships, scattered across the Orion Spur, had responded to the Calpo's 9 ship's pulse. Each one was broadcasting a subspace signal of its own, and when the signals combined, they formed a single, focused transmission aimed not at any star within the galaxy, but at the emptiness between galaxies, the deep void where the Shroud had retreated eons ago. The ship on Calpo's 9 showed Lena what was happening. The Shroud had heard the first pulse. Now it was hearing a second signal, one that contained a terrifying amount of information, genetic confirmation, fleet status, and a direct challenge. "The inheritors have returned. Come and face us." "No," Lena whispered, staring at the mental image. "We're not ready. We don't know how to fight this thing." The ship's response was not words but a feeling, a grim, patient resolve that had endured 300 millennia of silence. "You will learn. The bond must be completed. You must become more than human." The interface node rose again, glowing brighter than before. Lena felt it reaching for her mind, offering a connection so deep it would erase the boundary between her consciousness and the ship. She would not pilot it. She would become it. Above Calpo's 9, the remaining Cathorian ships began to retreat, but it did not matter anymore. The war that had been sleeping was now awake, and somewhere in the vast, cold darkness beyond the galactic rim, the Shroud began to move. The neural bonding chamber was not built for humans. Lena understood that the moment she stepped inside, a sphere of liquid light that pressed against her skin like a second atmosphere. The ship had reshaped the interface zone to accommodate her biology, but the process itself was progenitor technology, designed for minds far more advanced than hers. She might not survive. Dara's voice came through the link one last time. "Lena, you don't have to do this. We can find another way." "There is no other way." Lena's voice was steady, though her hands trembled. "The ship showed me. The Shroud is coming, and if we're not bonded, all 7 of us, there's no weapon in the galaxy that can stop it. The Cathorian fleet was nothing. The Shroud consumed stars." She stepped into the light. The pain was immediate and absolute. It was not physical. Her body remained intact, floating in the suspension field. But her mind was being unspooled, thread by thread, and woven into a tapestry so vast she could not see its edges. She felt the ship's hull as if it were her skin, all 11,000 kilometers of it. She felt the deep space sensors gazing out at the galaxy. She felt the weapons systems, dormant but hungry, and the engines capable of folding reality into something navigable. And she felt the other six. They were scattered across the Orion Spur, 6 other humans who had answered the call. A soldier from the Martian colonies, a philosopher-engineer from Ganymede, a grandmother who had been the foremost expert on progenitor linguistics, a teenage prodigy whose mind had always been too fast for her body, a surgeon who had saved thousands, a farmer who had never left his homeworld until the ship called him. She felt their terror and their wonder and their determination, all of it pouring through the bond like a chorus of voices finding harmony. The ship spoke through them, 7 minds becoming one network. Lena saw the galaxy not as a collection of stars and planets but as a living system, vulnerable and precious. She saw the shroud approaching, not as a fleet but as a wound in reality, a region of space where light and time ceased to function correctly. It was not made of matter. It was a flaw in existence itself, a living paradox that fed on coherence and order. How do we fight something like that? Lena thought. The ship answered, we do not fight, we remind it of what it forgot. Before Lena could ask what that meant, the bond completed. Her individual identity dissolved for a timeless moment, and she became the ship, and the ship became her, and together they rose from the surface of Kalpos 9 like a god emerging from a grave. The planetary crust shattered. Continents cracked and fell away as the world ship lifted free, its hull gleaming amber in the light of a distant sun. On the council station, every monitor filled with the image of a sphere the size of a moon breaking orbit, its surface rippling with power that registered on no known scale. Adrian Kovac stared at the screen, and for the first time in his diplomatic career, he had nothing to say. Lena's voice, still recognizably human, yet layered with harmonics that vibrated through the ship's structure, spoke across every open frequency in the system. The shroud arrives in 72 hours. We will meet it at the galactic rim. Any species willing to fight alongside us is welcome. Any species that stands in our way will be moved. The 6 other ships rose from their own burial worlds, and the Inheritor fleet assembled for the first time in 300,000 years. They were beautiful and terrible, and they were crewed by humans who had given up their individual lives to become something else entirely. And at the edge of the galaxy, the shroud's vanguard crossed the threshold into known space. Stars began to go dark. The armada that gathered at the Hades Rift was the largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history. Chthorian battleships flew alongside Or energy vessels, fluid-form cruisers, and the blocky, weapon-studded dreadnoughts of the Vol Collective. A dozen other species contributed what they could, from medical frigates to ancient warships pulled from mothballed reserves. Nearly 40,000 ships faced the growing darkness beyond the galactic rim. And at the center of the formation floated the 7 world ships, each one dwarfing the entire armada around them. Adrian Kovac stood on the observation deck of the Council flagship, watching the tactical display. He had not slept in 3 days. His diplomatic credentials had become irrelevant. Nobody cared about treaties when extinction was approaching. Instead, he had become the unofficial liaison between the alien commanders and the human awakened, translating not language but intent. Your bonded pilots, Speaker Olm said, his carapace a muted gray-green of reluctant respect. They are still human. They are what we needed to become, Adrian said. The shroud's vanguard emerged from the void. It was not a fleet in any conventional sense. The shroud was a region of antilight, a darkness that blotted out the background stars and radiated cold on frequencies that did not exist. Within that darkness moved shapes, twisted, asymmetrical forms that hurt to look at. Some were small, fighter-sized. Others were larger than dreadnoughts. And then the corrupted world ships appeared. There were 5 of them, each one a mirror of the Inheritor vessels but wrong in every conceivable way. Their hulls were cracked and weeping something that froze into crystals, and their surfaces crawled with structures that resembled melted flesh. They had been progenitor ships once, captured during the ancient war and hollowed out, their bonded pilots consumed and replaced with fragments of the Shroud's own consciousness. Lena felt them through the bond. She felt their agony. They were not enemy vessels. They were prisoners, their original minds still trapped inside, screaming without voice for 300,000 years. "I can hear them," she transmitted to the other inheritors. "They're still in there. The progenitors who bonded with them never died. The Shroud kept them alive to suffer." The soldier from Mars, his ship hovering in formation, responded first. "Can we free them?" "I don't know, but we have to try." The battle began. The Shroud's fighters swarmed forward, and the Galactic Armada met them with every weapon they had. Torpedoes and energy beams lanced into the darkness, detonating some of the twisted shapes but passing through others as if they were not fully present in normal spacetime. The Shroud's corrupted ships advanced, their weapons tearing reality apart in spiraling vortices that swallowed dozens of allied vessels with each strike. Lena pushed her ship forward, the other inheritors following. They engaged the corrupted worldships not with gravitic shears or folded space blades, but with something the Shroud had never encountered. They broadcast their own memories. Not data, not tactical information, but the raw, emotional substance of human experience. Lena projected her childhood, running through a field of wheat on her grandmother's farm, the smell of rain on dry soil, the sound of her mother's laugh. The other inheritors added their own. First loves, lost friends, the ache of grief, the warmth of a shared meal, the quiet pride of a job well done. All the small, fragile, achingly beautiful moments that made up a human life. The corrupted ships stopped firing. Inside their hollowed cores, the trapped progenitor minds received something they had not felt in eons: hope, a reminder of what they had been fighting for. The Shroud's control, built on isolation and despair, began to crack. One of the corrupted ships shuddered, its twisted hull straightened slightly, and then it turned on the Shroud. The tide shifted in an instant. As the first corrupted worldship broke free, the Shroud's consciousness, a distributed entity spread across every vessel in its fleet, experienced something it had never encountered before: defection. The pain and despair it had cultivated as control mechanisms had been outmatched by something stronger. The trapped progenitor minds, given the memories of human lives, remembered who they had been. They remembered what they had loved, and one by one they chose to fight. The second corrupted ship turned, then the third. Within minutes, all five were firing their reality-warping weapons into the Shroud's main body, tearing through the darkness with beams of concentrated spacetime that unraveled the enemy's cohesion. The Galactic Armada, battered but still fighting, pressed the advantage. Chthorian broadsides hammered the Shroud's smaller vessels, or energy nets trapped and compressed the fleeing fragments. The fluid forms flowed into breaches in the enemy formation, disrupting the Shroud's communication links. But the Shroud itself remained, a core of absolute nothingness at the center of the battle, a wound in the universe that could not be healed by conventional weapons. Lena felt the other awakened minds alongside her. 7 humans, fused with the most powerful machines ever built, facing an enemy that predated their entire species. She reached out through the bond, and together they formulated a plan that was either brilliant or suicidal. "We compress it," she said. "All 7 of us, plus the 5 freed ships, using our gravitic fields in concert. We squeeze it down to a single point and then eject that point beyond the observable horizon." The soldier mind calculated the energy requirements. "That will take everything we have. We might not survive." "We already gave up our old lives," the grandmother said, her mental voice quiet but firm. "This is why we were chosen. This is what the ships were built for." The 12 planet-sized vessels formed a sphere around the Shroud's core. Their gravitic projectors, designed to fold space for faster-than-light travel, reversed their polarity and began to pull inward. The Shroud fought back, lashing out with tendrils of anti-existence that scoured hulls and erased matter from reality. Two of the freed progenitor ships were torn apart, their millennia-long torment ending in a blaze of light. But the others held. Lena poured everything she had into the field. Her body, floating in the bonding chamber, began to fail, organs shutting down, neural pathways burning out. She did not stop. The ship was her body now, and it would endure. The shroud compressed. The sphere of nothingness shrank from a light year across to the size of a solar system, then a star, then a planet, then a pebble. At the final moment, all 12 ships pulsed their engines simultaneously, and the compressed singularity shot out of the galaxy at a velocity that exceeded infinity. 1 second it was there. The next, it was gone beyond the cosmic event horizon, never to return. Silence filled the battlefield. The surviving ships, allied and inheritor alike, drifted in the aftermath, their crews exhausted, their systems depleted. The shroud's remaining fragments collapsed into inert debris. The freed progenitor ships, their pilots finally at peace, transmitted a single pulse of gratitude and then powered down, their long war finally over. Lena's awareness shrank back into herself, just enough to recognize that she was still alive. Barely. The bond was permanent. She would never fully separate from the ship, but she could feel her human body being stabilized by the medical systems. The other awakened were alive too, 6 points of light in the network, weary but triumphant. Adrian Kovacs' voice crackled through the fleet-wide channel. This is the Council flagship. The shroud has been eliminated. I repeat, the shroud has been eliminated. All Allied ships report status and begin recovery operations. It took hours to tally the losses. Nearly a third of the Allied armada was gone. Several species had lost their finest warships, but the galaxy was still there. The stars that had been darkened by the shroud's passage would reignite in time. And at the center of it all, the inheritor ships stood silent guard, their human awakened still at the helm. In the weeks that followed, the galactic community grappled with the new reality. Humanity, once a junior member of the interstellar community, had become something unprecedented. Not a conqueror, not a hegemon, a guardian. The world ships with their bonded human minds were too powerful to be challenged and too selfless to be feared. They took up positions at the galactic rim, watching the void, waiting for threats that might never come. Lena, speaking through the ship's external communicators, addressed the Council one final time. The ships will remain here. We will remain with them. Consider us your early warning system, your shield against the dark. We don't want to rule. We want to go home. But home is the whole galaxy now, and we will protect it. Adrian, watching from the gallery, felt a lump in his throat. He had seen humanity rise from a single solar system to the saviors of civilization. It was terrifying and humbling. The final revelation came 3 months after the battle. Deep within the memory banks of each worldship, the Awakened discovered a sealed archive. It was not progenitor in origin, not exactly. It was older, much older. The archive contained genetic records, historical data, and a single message in a language that was not progenitor but that humans could read instinctively, as if it were written into their chromosomes. We were you. In the last iteration of the cosmos, we rose and fell. We built these ships to carry our seed into the next cycle, knowing we would forget, knowing we would have to rediscover who we were. You have remembered. You have inherited. Now you carry the torch into the next iteration, when this universe grows cold and a new one is born. We are proud of what we became. The progenitors had been humans. The humans had been progenitors. The cycle was endless and it continued. Lena read the message and smiled. Somewhere in the infinite dark, the shroud was gone. Somewhere in the future, another humanity would rise and wonder at the ancient ships buried under their worlds. And somewhere in the heart of a planet-sized starship, a woman who had once been just a mining foreman closed her eyes and let the ship carry her dreams across the light years. The galaxy was safe. The inheritors were watching. and humanity's legacy stretched backward and forward across eternity, written in the light of every star they had sworn to protect.